Frustration is building in a Williamson County neighborhood as a utility company begins building a gas pipeline in their backyards. KXAN reporter Mercedez Hernandez explains how the company is using a deal made nearly a century ago as grounds to start the project. Welcome to Inside the Investigation. I'm Kelly Wiley, and today we're joined by Mercedez Hernandez. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, yes, I'm always so excited to be here.
We're always so excited because you've been doing incredible reporting for months about eminent domain in Texas, and in particular how it's impacting communities. Tell us about your latest story.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Kelly. So this latest story that I was working on is a kind of a specific neighborhood issue. So there's a neighborhood out in Round Rock off of East Old Settlers Boulevard. One woman, her name's Orlena Morabian, she reached out to us through our tip line, the report it at KXAN.com email, and just said that she was having an issue with an Atmos energy pipeline behind her home. And some pretty interesting revelations were made there, including a nearly 100-year-old deal, this easement that the company has owned now for X many years, was a lot larger than she initially thought, than she says was initially disclosed to her. So yeah, just opening up a lot of questions, and just kind of especially some big questions on how long is too long for these plans whenever, these deals were made years and years and years ago before some of these people even lived there. They're not a part of the deal at all.
Well, let's watch the story and then we'll come back and talk about it.
Cool.
The wide open space behind Orlena Morabian's home looks more like a construction site than a rural landscape.
So I've been living here almost 30 years, and that's when they came out here and they just showed up one day.
That first visit was in 2021, but last spring, her family received this letter saying Atmos planned to replace a 4-inch gas line with a 16-inch line. To do that, it would need to take the land behind her home.
They're expanding the easement from 20 feet to 50 feet.
An easement is the right for a person or entity to access someone's land for a specific use, in this case, to run a natural gas pipeline. She says this easement is much bigger than she expected.
And this easement here is 257 acres.
Yeah, that's it.
More than a dozen other neighbors have signed letters against the plan. But when did Atmos get the easement rights? Atmos took over the easement from the Lone Star Gas Company, which this document shows bought the 257-acre easement for $39 in 1928, nearly 100 years ago.
Easements that are 100 years old are very limited in their language.
Chris Clough is an eminent domain lawyer. He says once an easement agreement is made, it's often difficult to break, even if you weren't part of the initial deal.
That's one of the most important things that they will insist on within the easement document, is that they don't lose their rights just by property owners selling the properties.
Morabian and her neighbors say if a bigger pipeline must go in, they'd like it to be rerouted away from their properties and instead along some smaller existing roads. As of this week, the line was still following the originally planned route.
I have no problem with Atmos routing it and going that way. It would be safer.
I just kind of have my mouth open the whole time watching it, because I can't imagine owning a home and then I would imagine feeling a bit helpless as to what's going on with this project. What's happening now?
Yeah, so the project is just kind of continuing as it was originally planned. Atmos gave us a statement too that was kind of in the tag, if you will, of that story, the on-air version. They said that they try their hardest to, kind of keep neighbors that are impacted by construction like this one kind of abreast of the situation, and I've seen text messages too that it's pretty casual, like, hey, crews will be over here at this day, will you be sure to move your trucks out of the way, or something like that. So they just kind of doubled up on the the communication factor, that they are communicating with these neighbors. Yeah, and I think it's their concern is not so much the communication, but that the crews are there just at all. But yeah, I think at the very least they do know kind of what's going on, when people will be there. It sounds like, at least.
Right. Wow. So it is crazy to me, though, that this agreement from so long ago, I mean, probably honestly before a lot of them were even born, people who didn't live there at the time, didn't sign on to it, that they would be still beholden to it. How does that work?
Yeah, so I mean, just to give you kind of an even more of an example of just how old this agreement is, I mean, it had a little line in there about that this easement had certain kind of guidelines for telegraph wires, for telegraphs. So that's an extremely kind of antiquated form of communication, I think is safe to say. And so, yeah, these agreements are, made between an owner, and then at the time, in this instance, it was the Lone Star Gas Company, and then Atmos over time, acquired those rights by either maybe purchasing the company or purchasing the rights from them. I did kind of uncover a lawsuit that was between Atmos and another public utility company, kind of fighting over all of the rights from the Lone Star Land Company, who was going to kind of succeed in owning that easement in that right-of-way. And that was a pretty recent lawsuit. I can't remember the exact year, but I want to say it's definitely within the last 10 years for sure. So even then, that's still, 90 years after the original agreement was made. That, Round Rock looks completely different than it did in 1928. So it's just, those agreements are pretty ironclad. They're hard to get out of once they've been established, because that's just the rights afforded to companies like public utility companies. They have special rights that are protected by Texas laws.
And I'm not even sure if they've disclosed this to you, but did any of the neighbors say that they were told upon buying their house or buying their property that this was a possibility?
So Orlena kind of explained it to me that they were aware that there was an easement, but they thought the easement was much smaller. I think it was the 20 or 30 feet wide. That's kind of was the original layout for the plan, but they didn't realize that it was what's called a blanket easement. And so that is, the nearly 300 acres. They tell me that they weren't aware of that at the time of buying their house over 30 years ago.
Wow. Okay, so can the neighbors do anything at this point, or is it just kind of a lost cause?
I think a big concern that they shared with me is obviously their property values. We know that the value of land in Williamson County just changes so rapidly. And they are kind of worried that with this construction, what that means for their land. I'm so sorry, I forget the original question, but
just
what can they do?
Yeah,
so they're just kind of raising awareness with each other, with other neighbors, to double check, that they have all of the documents for those easement rights. As of whenever I put this report together, which I'm hoping to kind of put together a longer form story that delves more into the private side of eminent domain, because that is a whole other side than the public side of things, is that in these kind of easement right agreements, if they need a little bit more land, for example, to expand this pipeline, they have to pay the Moravians for it, and they haven't signed an agreement as of this story, but I think, I don't want to make any assumptions here, but it was, in my opinion, a pretty low offer considering the amount that the land is worth. So I think that's kind of the individual power that they can have at this time, is kind of negotiating how much money they're given if Atmos does need more of their money, aside from, alongside the blanket easement that they already have.
This is so interesting, Mercedes. I mean, we know the viewers are interested in it.
Yeah.
I mean, we saw so many people write into you watching this story, your original investigation on this, and I'm really looking forward to the update that you're planning to do. Thank you so much. And we're going to pull up the web story here so you can get a look at where you can find this on our website, KXAN.com. Mercedes has been doing incredible reporting on eminent domain. And I think anybody who is a homeowner, anybody who wants to own a home, especially these areas that are growing, right?
Yeah.
And where, you may not understand all of the different contracts and agreements around where you live or where you want to live. It's important to be aware and know what rights you might have. And so I hope you check out this reporting. Mercedes, thank you so much.
Yes, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.